We don't always agree on what's wrong with the world, but we do agree something's wrong with the world. And that says a lot about us. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. This is Breakpoint. Ever since the horrific killing of George Floyd, the moral outrage in our nation has been palpable. The moral consensus, however, has not been. While some cry out against violence by police, others cry out against violence against the police. Systemic racism is either the most important problem we face, or it doesn't exist at all, as others say. We must defund the police, according to some. We must support the police, according to others. Certainly, these debates over what exactly is wrong with our country and the world, and what can and must be done to fix it, will continue. In the meantime, however, we shouldn't miss what the moral outrage, even when it's wrongly conceived and violently expressed, still reveals about who we are and the kind of world we live in. In his discussion of morality and the meaning of the universe and mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis observed that humans are irrepressibly moral creatures. We believe there's such a thing in the world as justice. That we protest when we see behavior we believe to be unjust, especially when it's directed at us, reveals that we believe there's a way that the world should be. A man does not call a line crooked, Lewis wrote, unless he has some idea of a straight line. But where does this idea of a moral straight line, of justice and morality, even come from? Why do we even think in terms of justice and morality in the first place? A naturalistic worldview that's built on atheism and concludes that the world's merely a product of natural causes and forces, it cannot explain the existence of justice or morality. In fact, not only does such a world not offer any grounding for the very ideas of justice and morality, it can't explain why we should think in those terms. If the whole universe has no meaning, Lewis wrote, we should never have figured out that it has no meaning. Just as, if there were no light in the universe and therefore no creatures with eyes, we should never know it was dark. Dark would be without meaning. But not only do we clearly believe that justice and morality do exist in the world and that we can know what is just and right, we think others should know it too. Lewis unpacks this brilliantly as well. Whenever you find a man who says he does not believe in a real right and wrong, Lewis wrote, you will find the same man going back on this a moment later. He might break his promise to you, but if you try breaking one to him, he'll be complaining it's not fair before you can say Jack Robinson. The protesting and the rioting and the angry social media posting and the breathless news reporting run the gamut today between helpful and unhelpful, from righteous anger to unrighteous opportunism. And yet, we are seeing across the nation and around the world a fundamental feature of the human condition and of the world we live in. There's an expectation that there is such a thing as justice and that justice should be done. Now, clearly, this reveals the silliness and the bankruptcy of moral relativism, in which every act is simply a matter of preference or convenience. I mean, you'll never see anyone take to the streets and carry a sign that says, "End police brutality," because it's inconvenient. Lewis concludes his discussion of the moral law by then wrestling with the desire that we hold for a world in which justice is actually done, in which no one's ever murdered, and in which racism and violence against innocents are unthinkable. Our ability to imagine this world in which wrongs are all made right, well, that reveals a lot about us as well. Later in Mere Christianity, Lewis argues that no human longing exists unless its fulfillment also exists. If I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, Lewis wrote, the most probable explanation is I was made for another world. So, we live in a world where the very ideas of justice and morality exist. We're creatures able to think in terms of justice and morality. We expect others to think in terms of justice and morality. And we can imagine a better world in which all wrongs are made right and justice prevails. What explains this? As we said earlier, atheism cannot. And Eastern pantheisms that ultimately fail to distinguish between good and evil, they can't either. But a good God, who's the ultimate source of reality, who creates us in his image, gives us moral freedom, and then promises to restore all things? Hey, that explains it. For Breakpoint, I'm John Stonestreet.